I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sage, joined by my buddy Patrick McCray, who's coming at you from the Carey Mansion, the Seaview Terrace, also known as. And we're gonna do or Patrick's gonna read some stuff from the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound, some essays that I picked out. Are you? Let's do it.
This is Joel. First of all, I got to tell you, Seaview Terrace is pretty cool. I mean, you know, this is like it is
hold on. Hello.
The interior is not an exact match for Collinwood. Yeah. What you would want in this kind of thing. It's breathtaking outside at every time of day. It's just like being on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
It's really you know, so if and you can just, even though they have signs about dogs and things like that, it's not Fort Knox.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that. I mean, you can certainly get near the grounds and take pictures of it without, incurring the wrath of Khan or whoever. So Jewel, yeah. So hopefully I think we got a hardback edition of this thing coming out in the next few weeks.
Cool.
And so that'd be appropriate at Seaview Terrace for me to read some of these. So what's the first one you picked out?
Give me 1 second. I picked, let's see, episode 856, page 204.
856. See, pages are relative depending on your font and what star sign you were born under and things like that. However, so what was it about this one that made you pick it?
I just wanted to pick random essays out of the book.
Oh, okay. Just roll the die. Okay, terrific. Well, let's do it.
I didn't know. Sorry, yeah.
No. Have you heard me read many of these?
I've never. The only one I heard you read was the one you read for me and Gordon. That was the only one.
Oh, that. Okay, well, I try and give it a little bit of a flourish. Here we go. Episode 856. When Quentin awakens in Patofi's body, will Magda think to pry him out in time? Quentin, they are David. Repeat 30 minutes. Patofi switches bodies with Quentin to travel through time, but Quentin is unable to convince Magda. Is true. First Jameson just for a laugh, and then Quentin to travel in time. In at least the right or maybe luck to set up secondary payoffs to what seem like small story mechanics and surprises. 1897 is such a generous storyline that we get these seeds planted not just weeks, but entire meteorological seasons in advance. In this case, it leads to two of the most interesting performances on the series and sheds light on the pluses and minuses of the character of Quentin Collins. As Ben Stokes, Thayer David blended strength and vulnerability with surprise and nuance. As Quentin Collins, trapped in Patofi's body, David adds another layer to the alternating realizations of advantage and privilege, or advantage and privation. Intelligence. Quentin is a bright man, used to being in control of his immediate circumstances. If the 1897 storyline is about Quentin growing up, literally going from ghost to man, then to do so when deprived of his familiar talents, he's got to rely on underdeveloped strengths. Is Quentin intelligent? Yes, quite so. He is perhaps not as academically advanced as Barnabas, but he excels at observation and processing, which are not always his vampiric cousin's strengths. Do we see this? Up to now, not as much as we should. Quentin has height, looks, and limitless charm on which he can rely to get him out of most problems. Not only are these muscles stronger than his mind, they usually lead to results that are a lot more fun. Well, that fun is Pitofi's to be had as he kidnaps Quentin's body and sticks our hero in the family truckster. As this storyline goes on, Quentin's evolution is clear. The character is haunted by Pitofi's terrorist actions within his shape, learning of the privilege he took for granted and honing his humanity by relying on contemplativeness and compassion in the place of sex appeal. Never before or since his character on Dark Shadows evolved so thoroughly, believably, and dramatically. He is cursed by the gods on a level that goes beyond the Shakespearean and into the amphitheaters of the ancient Greeks. Quentin is a man who has everything, ignores that fact, and instead lusts for, for an antihistamine, lusts for everything he didn't need. If his stint as the Packless Wolf began the less heightening this wild physicality and a strange subtlety is David Selby's performance as Count Pitofi. I was about to write that he makes a marvelous Bond villain, showing us who Quentin would have been if the writers hadn't cared about making him anything other than a total black-hearted bastard. As those guys go, this is one of the most charismatic portrayals I've seen on screens, great or small. Then it struck me. I know what Selby's doing, accidentally or not. He's showing us the man Quentin would have been in middle age if he had learned none of the lessons forced on him by fate and the writer's room. This Pitofiized version of Quentin has everything he could have ever wanted and is revoltingly smug about it. The sickening truth is that absolute power cannot corrupt the already corrupted. It just serves as an admirable complement. In the moral balance, the real Quentin's lesson is even more haunting. He is humbled, he learns, he becomes a better man. And perhaps as such, he is alone and empty for nearly a century. I say that passing no more judgment on it than does the show. It's simply a fact for him. Virtue is no guarantee of joy, and there is no ruder awakening for a man like Quentin Collins when vice has lost its luster as well. He becomes twice the moralist that his brother is, a fraction as happy, and unable to go back once he's seen there's a better way to treat the world. And we wonder why he goes mad.
Yeah. Really, really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Gordon was right. These book, they're a little crunchier, I think, maybe, sort of. So what do we got next?
Give me 1 second.
I got a second for you. This is going to be great for my throat and breathing.
Okay, episode 1, page 317.
Almost 3. Okay. One singular sensation. 317. That's no 317. That's my wife. Hang on. Here we go. Page your location. Cancel. Oh God, this is boring. How on earth is this happening, Jewel? So, how about those Mets? Who's your money on this year?
Well, I'm a Padres guy, so
Oh, you're a Padres guy. Well, I hated the Padres in that movie. Where little Anakins and the thing. Is that the? No, that's different Padres. San Diego. I used to live in San Diego. I had to testify against the chicken in a violent court case. The chicken had a dark side. Let's just put it that way. I won't say human trafficking ring, but not all those eggs were in the same basket. Let's just put it that way. Okay, episode 1. You ready for this? This is good. It's episode 1. It's the other white meat episode. It's, you say that about pork. Episode 1. A sophisticated New Yorker gives up big city life for the charm of rural America. Will she find colorful locals and a talking pig, or terror? Mr. Wells, Red Bane. Repeat 30 minutes. Victoria Winters ventures from Manhattan to Collinsport to assume the position of governess in a forbidden her arrival. Along the way, she meets a brooding business tycoon, quietly obsessed with her future employer's isolation. A charismatic diner waitress, Maggie Evans, joins the chorus of those who warn her away from Collinwood. Okay, so technically, it's the 56th anniversary of the first episode of Dark Shadows. Except that it really isn't. It's the 56th anniversary of the first episodes of Shadows on the Wall. After all, if Art Wallace had any idea that the show would have wound up as it did, there's no way this would have been the pilot. That doesn't make the pre-Barnabas episodes inferior, but I do see them as a separate series. I think it's helpful to look at it through that lens. How to introduce Dark Shadows? I mean, really, this sets a certain atmosphere, but I'm not certain it's an atmosphere that works with the ultimate point of the show. And yet, it's still a marvelous piece of storytelling. This is both a small and large episode. It exists at night, with small ghostly characters surrounded by vast swaths of darkness. Yet it is an expansive episode, almost an epic compared to the rest of the series. It has 11 characters, which is over twice the norm of the program. It takes place on trains and at the Blue Whale and at Collinwood and in New York and in the Collinsport Inn lobby and at the attached diner and even on a lonely street corner. It takes 2 cities to tell this story and uses abundant flashbacks, thus told over multiple days, even though it's also just a tiny slice of one endless night. As the next episodes go on, they will all be taking place over this day. And yet this day begins after dark. And if that's supposed to be in early to mid-June, during some of the longest days of the year, how timelessness creates an atmosphere. And pure atmosphere is what powers the entire story as we learn about Victoria Winters and her quest for home and how long is that evening? The strange and wonderfully surreal slice of pure meaning and identity. So, yes, it's the 56th anniversary of Shadows on the Wall. And without that, we wouldn't have had Dark Shadows. Let us celebrate it as its own animal. Yeah, I know, it's all one big text and it's one big story. And yes, I'm violating my own rules by looking at this as more of a slice of real-world production than the first piece of a 1,225-piece puzzle. But what's analysis without a little internal contradiction, right? It's fun to watch how Art Wallace deploys the characters, sets, and information that viewers will need. It gives a clear view of his priorities and what did or did not hook audiences. As the episode begins, Vicky is introduced as someone in search of meaning, having to find out as much as she possibly can about everything. That singular need makes her oft-repeated mantra of, "I just don't understand," feel more grating for her to say than for us to hear. Meanwhile, Roger is preoccupied with the danger of bringing a stranger into the house, while Liz seems determined to do so. When we consider that Liz is the one who has been isolating herself for 18 years, the situation becomes intentionally absurd. That is a quieter mystery than Vicky's quest. It is one to be revealed under the skin of the story, but it's more profound than any of the others. Painting Roger as an angry xenophobe may be the only sour note. You still getting this? I had a computer thing. Okay. Maybe the only sour note here. After all, the trial and Burke's imprisonment were over years ago. Unless Roger is obsessed with Burke's return, he's in a pretty comfortable place. The later Roger of Dark Shadows would be thrilled at someone new coming into town. And from a dramatic perspective, having him in a place of smug comfort might have been a good height from which he could fall with Burke's return. But it would. And One more mystery. Why is Roger such an intense sour as a character? Collinsport is depicted in a suitably dreamlike fashion. The conductor says that there are normally no regular stops there, making the town seem beyond isolation for a place with a major business within. We wonder how it can possibly hope to exist. Not only has Liz isolated herself, and not only is Collinwood a fortress from the outside, but the entire town seems insulated from any kind of external influence. We understand why Burke calls it the beginning and the end of the world. In her flashbacks, Vicky keeps hearing the question, "What are you going to do?" And her answer is the answer of the 20th century. To take action is to step into a void of nothingness, hoping for the best. Even though the episode is in black and white, magnificently, its investment in the symbolism of color is no more pointed than when we hear about what Burke and Vicky have physically brought to Collinsport. Burke is saddled with 2 black bags, literally representing his copious personal baggage and their ominous contents and weight. Vicky has only one piece of luggage, red. Her desirability, or her heart, or her intensity, or her sense of life, or maybe Bart Wallace just liked typing the word red. But it's a passionate color, making her a tad less virginally naive when she meets her Collinsport counterpart, Maggie. At this point, they split up. Vicky stays at the inn, place of nourishment and comfort, where people know Burke with a fond warmth incongruous with his cold demeanor. And Burke, he goes off to a bar which says it all. He leaves the girl with the red tote and journeys to the blue whale, a color both sad and obscene. Attached to the largest animal on the planet, is he Jonah or Ahab or both? They both learn valuable information from possible allies, or not. Vicky meets Maggie. Vicky meets Maggie, who so little resembles the later character of Maggie Evans that the part might as well be played by Danny Trejo. Maggie is a wonderful foil for Vicky, worldly and edgy and keeping nothing to herself. They are both seemingly working class and yet nothing alike. At the bar, Burke learns that Elizabeth has been isolated for 18 years. That's big news for the audience, but upon reflection, it seems odd that Burke would not know some of this. He hasn't been away that long, but the mystery of Collinwood pervades. It feels as if Vicky's impending danger is printed in bold on every page as the pilot moves her closer and closer to Collinwood. Just like Barnabas would 211 episodes later. On the door to the portmanteau to gain entry. It's a very specific shot repeated for significant characters entering Collinwood, ones who seem to have more of a place there than many of the actual residents. As Liz ushers her in, the episode's abrupt end brings our attention to what we still long to know. As the camera pulls away from the conversation to follow, we feel like voyeurs yanked back into the anonymous night. It's a directorial move telling us that we have only gotten a brief glimpse. As Vicky was allowed back in, will our stay be? It's a terse and suspenseful inauguration. What would that series have been like if it had been a success as envisioned? Within 2 years, Vicky would not only be lost in space, but in time as well. Her mysteries would mount rather than diminish. Perhaps Maggie never lost her grasp as she gained texture and nuance. It takes grit and glamour to win the attention of television's brainiest, most diabolical beaux. I don't see Nicholas and Barnabas on the menu at this point, but I'm happy to hang around for them. Shadows are made to reveal surprises. Nothing could have surprised viewers more than what awaited them in the ones cast here. This episode hit the airwaves June 27th, 1966.
Very, very good. Very, very good, sir.
That was a long one. That was a long one, but I finally had to do it because this idea of when Dark Shadows begins, what is the first episode, it's become a McCray cliche because I talk about it so much, but it's really important. You know, I mean, we can't escape its centrality to the show because at the same time, it shows a Mobius strip. Jump on whenever you want.
I thought it appropriate to choose that one considering where Victoria ends up by the end of the night. She ends up in the great house.
Yeah, you are correct. We are all the cosmic Vicky Winters.
Yep. Our next one is episode 490, page 100.
490.
Yes.
Okay. 490. On the eve of Adam's creation, wait, Barnabas, repeat 30 minutes. Julia reels from the dream, and Barnabas fears what should happen if she shares it with Mrs. Johnson. Of course, Mrs. Johnson shows up, somewhat in a daze and claiming to have no dreams whatsoever. Julia is relieved after sharing the dream, and at the same time, Barnabas reassures Victoria that if she likes him, she'll love his cousin, Adam. What a coincidence that they won't be around at the same time. Meanwhile, the attempt to bring Adam to life goes somewhat haywire, resulting in both Barnabas and Adam being alive at the same time. I often wonder if Dan Curtis found himself in a position analogous to Barnabas and Julia around this time. Do any of the three of them know the nature of the pickle they're in? The challenge facing all three is, once we've created the lug, then what? He's going to struggle and shamble and then eventually go away for several months of unresolved tension. That is, if it follows the model of the novel, which the whole thing does. I mean, kind of. This is the first case where following the literary model limits rather than liberates the writing staff. However, in 490, they're on the precipice and all things are still possible. In fact, they skirt around a much more interesting storyline on the way, and things are memorably wacky before that, too. In the cosmic meanwhile, it's so nice to see the show settle in perverse domestic comedy of life with Barnabas and Julia. It's even nicer to see the temporary role reversal of Barnabas hectoring Julia into action, nudging the doctor to work harder and faster. Clad in a robe for the climax, Jonathan Frid might as well be wearing a mask of cold cream and have his hair in curlers while he's at it. With the Adam experiment doomed to the failure of mixed baggery, it's in an episode of tense optimism surrounded by fatalism. Sleep gives no relief. The dream curse is now upon Julia, and that puts it one step closer to a plan so insane that no one would have anything to do with it unless it sat at the end of a year of and terrible seemed like a good idea at the time decisions. Doomed when waking, doomed when sleeping, the option of just stopping and living with the ugly life of a vampire doesn't occur to them. Amid this festival of fatalism, beginning with the dream curse and ending with the horrifying realization that both Adam and Barnabas are still alive, the show gives us one crucial reminder of why they're doing it at all. It's not a matter of escaping from Angelique. It's escaping to Victoria. In doing this, though, the writers set themselves up for a trap. The storyline that would have been triggered had the Adam plan been successful is far more interesting than what we get. And it can be sensed even if this is your first time with the show. Imagine Barnabas showing back up in another body, arguably a more powerful one, to Victoria, a more attractive one. It's a new dawn, and one that thoroughly confuses Angelique. Maybe Jonathan Frid gets a vacation. Maybe he lives but is reverted to the man he was before the experiment. So there are two Barnaby. I just know the prospect of Barnabas reinsinuating himself into Collinwood as someone else is an intriguing potential that almost becomes realized. Maybe that's what would happen if they were to do it today. But it's vital to remember that all of these things were firsts for television, or almost firsts. Moving on to the Frankenstein is a logical step for the show, since in our collective imaginations, that legend follows Dracula as if it were part of the same word. This show borrows from Dracula only in the sense that both stories involve people who bite others and drink their blood. There might have been greater versatility played as fast and loose with Frankenstein. The potential of a man who doesn't exist, inhabited by the soul of a man who perhaps should not exist, is the real kernel of the drama. The writers were wise to pursue that unrealized possibilities of the overall. Yes, they revisit it with interesting results during parallel time, but the spark of "it's alive" is a fleet. This episode hit the airwaves May 10th, 1968.
Very, very good.
I know you dig the Atom stuff.
I do.
You're an Atom. You're a man of the Atom age.
Robert Rodin did a hell of a job. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit, and I'm glad you covered it in the book. I mean, it was really cool.
You know, he's very good. And it makes me wish there had been a Robert Ghidra and a Robert Mothra and a Robert Jaguar. Everything's coming up, Toho. All right. How many of these have we done? Is that 3 or 4?
Let's see. 1, 2. We've done 3. So, well, no, we've done. Let's see. Episode 1. Episode 2. We've done 3 now. We're on the 4th one, which is episode 765, page 189.
765. Okay. As Barnabas pumps Beth for information, will Magda pump Quentin full of 6 silver bullets? She's locked, loaded, and ready to say I'm sorry 6 times in a row. Quentin Collins, Alex Stevens. Repeat 30 minutes. Already you're intrigued. With a wolf on the prowl, Barnabas knows that Beth holds the key to its secret. Barnabas bites her, and she informs him that the wolf is Quentin, and that Quentin has a legacy he doesn't even know about. 2 children. Magda, rife with remorse, hunts the wolf as the wolf stalks the estate. But fatally, it would be inaccurate and hyperbolic of me to say this episode is pure action, so I will. For Dark Shadows, this is pure action. And if Dark Shadows action has a name, other than Thayer David, it's Alex Stevens. We owe him a lot. He performed several spectacular falls in this one, on par with his Marvel Comics explosion through the Evans Cottage window earlier in the series. His greatest stunt may have involved padding on the floor, but I didn't see it, and the sudden reality of it is stunning. On the attack, the werewolf leaps over the railing onto the 2nd story, landing on the foyer, lands and keeps going. If you own an ankle, you realize what an impressive stunt this is, simply in its blunt relatability. It's a straightforward moment, and it may be the most magical sight on the show. Because special effects are clearly unreal, even at their most realistic, they are inherently devoid of wonder. The great Ray Harryhausen may be a magnificent artist and technician, but magician he ain't. Even when his work is defined state-of-the-art, the herky-jerky movement, the weirdness of scale immediately told you to start using euphemisms like heightened later on, lest you be harassed by his devotees. Magic is different. Magic shows the impossible as possible and leaves as the only conclusion this happened. At what point? At that point, apologies to the makeup crew, Stevens could have gotten away with no appliances at all, just a t-shirt that said werewolf, and we'd be sold. It's a moment of sudden wonder. And suddenly, from the floor up, Collinwood stops being symbolic of anything and becomes a real place. It taped today, but it played on Friday, May 30th. And I think that's a symbolic. You know, wolf it is most exciting, and I strategic. This was, for many, the last day of school for 3 glorious months. In the past few days, Jonathan Frid and David Selby had recorded their contributions to the album, Original Music from Dark Shadows, which would become a massive hit in that year of massive hits. Viewmaster reels were steady sellers. It was the year of the Barnabas Collins Dark Shadows board game. And this one action-packed, exposition-packed installment slammed the locker door on school for the best part of the best year of the best show that millions of kids had ever seen. It was the last day they had to run home from anywhere to see it, and the writers ensured that the marathon mattered. It certainly feels as if there is more screen time for Stevens than on any other episode of the program. Dark Shadows may very well have reached its zenith. Ratings and demographics were measured differently then, and so I can't state anything definitively about who was watching. My instinct tells me that given the items for sale and the significance of the day, this may be one of the most enjoyed episodes of the entire series. It was certainly the most meaningful for a nation of kids. I don't need anthropological data to back me up on that. A great episode? Certainly. Mature? Thank goodness, no. You have bats, Beth with a vampire's dream of an endless neck, bitten and controlled. Barnabas learns of Quentin's curse, the children, and finally what he's doing in 1897 at all. The last part is the vegetables of the episode, but at least there's cheese sauce. Collins, coming for months and months, and you know the things. Now equipped with as much truth as anyone knows, the adventure of 1897 should be concluding. Barnabas should be climbing into his coffin for the voyage home. Of course, a certain Count is about to hear part is waiting for him in Collinsport. And if stuntman Alex Stevens is magic, the Count is sorcery.
Very, very good. What's your favorite part of 1897, Patrick?
Just Quentin Collins.
Yeah.
You know, really Quentin Collins and Count Patofi. They match him. That this is what the show was heading to the whole time. How insane, how wonderful.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, David Selby is just amazing. I mean,
Because he plays both Quentin Collins and Count Patofi.
Yeah, the way the writers did that and the way they shot that was just masterful too.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Okay, our next one. So, episode 871, page 206.
871. Oh, that was one of my naughty ones. It starts with a naughty, naughty joke, Jewel. I'll warn you right now, we might get yanked off the air. Episode 871. As Angelique explains how she made Barnabas into a new man, Charles Delaware Tate reluctantly shows Patofi, David Selby. Repeat 30 minutes. Kitty Soames manifests the spirit of Josette to such an extent that she and Barnabas seem nearly reunited, and it feels so good. Perhaps because Barnabas understood. But what, Peaches and Herb? But what? That and Angelique explains when she tells Quentin how she faked Barnabas's staking by creating a duplicate of him while she cured the other of her own curse. Meanwhile, Count Patofi forces Charles Delaware Tate to throw the I Ching wands, and the 49th hexagram at last appears, taking the artist into visions of 1969. Patofi now knows how to transport himself there, and he roars with triumphant anticipation of his destiny in the future. 871 makes me appreciate just how elaborate Dark Shadows actually is. It also makes me wish the rest of the show were more like 871. There is not one frame of subtlety to be found, even if the line delivery is occasionally muted. The writing is not. And it makes me appreciate Sam Hall and Gordon Russell all the more. The episode's writer, Violet Wells, was their amanuensis. Barnabas taught me that word. And by just inhaling the creative fumes coming off their conversations and creations, she may be the show's best writer and secret weapon. And she doesn't have time for nuance. Sometimes, God love them, Sam and Gordon had the other characters in prior episodes suck the wind out of the series with talk, talk, talk. That's what happens when you fill 10 weeks of programming with 10 hours of actual plot. Because perhaps she had fewer shots at being produced. Violet, to accomplish, thank you. over the old mill at this episode is almost all payoffs. Sam and Gordon were wrapping up 1897, the show's finest hours of entertainment. That's almost the duration of the entire series before Barnabas was introduced. A and the other writers must have been led staggering out of the office to this day off. I can see interns putting little capes on them like James Brown's pit crew helping the equally spent legend off stage at the end of a concert. They were probably led to typewriters elsewhere to keep working on House of Dark Shadows' latest draft. This isn't the last episode of 1897, but it's awfully close. Might as well be. Violet's assignment must have been a bittersweet compliment. To get that far and then hand it over to someone else, was there envy? Pride for a colleague? Relief? All of those things are probably too interesting. It was probably just business. It's very easy to gaze at art on a deeper level than the artist ever did. Theater, I was told, is art. Television is a piece of furniture. That was a truism within the TV business itself. For Sam, Gordon, and company, it was far more likely another day at a good gig, other than that fans liked one that fans liked far more than they did. And how can we not with 871? It begins by rooting us in the core mythos and giving our hero what he's wanted since we met him. Josette. Yes, okay, she's supposed to marry Edward, but well, I mean, Edward's no Jeremiah. And yes, she's having flashbacks to being Kitty again. That's pork chops and applesauce compared to barriers that Barnabas has faced before, including sending his soul backward by nearly a century to be intentionally trapped in a sealed coffin. But even the an emotional banquet we've wanted for nearly 500, Barnabas isn't the only one who's been waiting. The big news follows right after, which is the narrative of how Angelique both cured Barnabas of vampirism and arranged for him to be staked without causing him actual harm. It's a monologued montage that unusual for Barnabas. It includes flashback pieces featuring the actors themselves.
Hello? Hello? Oh, shit. Sorry. Hello?
The sound really varies. It's like it comes right in here and just blossoms. And I've been fighting this for like. Oh, you're trying to pull the door. Yeah, that's rain. I'm just trying to close the door. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just. I don't know. It sounds like I'm going to right here, but it's. Do you want to go to the intro? No, because the Wi-Fi's terrible. Oh. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, I'm just gonna try and get it. I think this has to become a thing, and I'm just trying to get over it. It's actually going right now. I know, but it's like, it sounds like fun. I know how it's saying because you need to move it different. It's like something sound just like comes into here and just balloons. Yeah. Joel, I'm sorry. I've been fighting this for a long time. They had no idea they were that loud. I don't know how it worked there. Maybe you paused it or something.
No.
It was deafening.
I'm so sorry. I got to the. Oh, wait. Sorry.
I want to get this over with now. So maybe we do this as like something.
What's that?
Can we maybe stop this earlier?
Yeah.
And then do a part 2?
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 for sure. When do you want to do part 2?
I mean, we can do it now.
Yeah.
No. Actually, I'll tell you what. Let's do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
I just
fine.
had to stop.
We did.
Um,
The only part we ran into any trouble was the last little bit
I
there,
know.
but other than that, it went pretty good. So,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the last thing I wanted you to read was The Last Sunset of Ben Cross. We'll do that
And
tomorrow.
that's I started thinking about like just fighting that volume during that. I don't want to
Yeah.
have to do that.
No.
Okay. Jewel, thank you.
No, thank you for your patience, man. I
No
mean,
problem.
we've had a lot. We've had some
No
technical
problem.
difficulties with this one,
No problem.
but it was a lot of fun for you to read those. That was really
It
cool,
was.
man.
I have to move on though.
Okay, have a good night, Patrick. Be
Okay.
safe.
Thank you.
Bye bye.